All right. So Micheal Waters, author of Bridge to Light and Love, one of the one of the books that really changed my life. I'm really glad to be talking with you today.
Sure, glad to be here.
Yeah. Now, for our listeners who don't and haven't read the book, how would you summarize it as a one-liner?
I think I would describe it as um, a direct contact from the spirit world as a plea to help the connection between the living world and the world from beyond. Um, they kind of, I guess, coaxed my wife along and developed her latent skills that she had, and then eventually mine. And we began to do psychopomp work, and then it just kind of grew from there. And then they eventually asked us to write a book about our experiences, which was a real shock because neither one of us had ever written a book and knew anything about doing that. They said, just speak from the heart. And so we did.
That's what I felt when I was reading the book for the first time. So the work that you and Kathy were called to do is psychopomp. And so how would you describe a psychopomp to someone who's never heard of that?
Well, in short, I would say how I would describe psychopomp is the study of life after death and sometimes assisting those spirits into the light.
And so the assistance of spirits into the light. And which spirits are these all spirits, or do all spirits need help, let's say, or did you find that there were certain spirits that needed more help than others?
No, it's a very small percentage actually, but there are many spirits for one reason or another don't feel worthy enough or don't feel like it's their time because they want to stay behind and help their family or loved ones or spouse or children or whoever that they are connected to or they were connected to in life, and they don't feel like they want to move on, or they don't feel like they're worthy to move on, like they killed somebody or committed some awful crime, or they were a pedophile, or they were Hitler, or, whoever it was.
That's fascinating. Okay, so in your book, you describe happening upon this land that called to you. You were looking for a new house, and so maybe tell us a little bit about how that unfolded from just a cute little house to wow, there's a whole lot more going on here.
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it, but when we first looked at it, as Kathy says in the book, uh, the property was wonderful. It was beautiful property. It was by the river. We hardly had neighbors. Um, it was just an ideal property, especially a big fenced yard for the dog. But the house was far too small. But the house was really too small for it. It was a small 3 bedroom, 1 bath house, and nobody wanted to buy it. And so we were able to buy it at a really good price. In fact, we didn't even buy it at first. We just what do they call that? Where you buy it on? It's not on time, but on rent to own. We did a rent to own, and we were there for 2 years. And then we decided, yeah, this is really where we want to be. We love this place. And so we bought it. And what was really interesting about it is that the people that were there went into the backyard with a bulldozer and took out all the trees and changed the topography of the land and everything. And I think they really ticked off the spirits that were back there. They did not like that at all. And they drove them out. And so they moved out, and that house was vacant for I think for 3 years before we got there. They couldn't sell it, and later on, the spirits told us, "Yeah, we got them out of here because they were disrespectful."
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting that the lady of the house would have these horrible, horrible nightmares where about her, they had a small child that the small child was being hurt, or that they were being hurt, or apparitions would come to them, and whoop, hello, kitty.
Hey, Katie.
He's a great cat. And so yeah, they drove them out because of that. And so that was not a surprise to us because with dealing with these people, they were kind of hinky people. And so they kind of got what they deserved, I guess. I don't know. because I wasn't there. But yeah, that was just interesting.
That's wild. They had no idea what was happening. They were just like, something's not right, but I'm not sure. We gotta get out of here.
Yeah, but when we get there, when we originally got to the property to look at it to consider buying it, I just had a really warm feeling like this is where we belong. And so I took Kathy in the backyard and I said, just sit here and feel the vibe here. I wasn't even that spiritual at that time. Just feel the vibe here. And so she did, and she goes, it's really nice. And I said, I'm a contractor. I can make the house bigger. It's not a big deal. And I did. We tripled the size of the house. And so, yeah, it just worked out. And then she loved it after that.
It's really special when you just feel called to a piece of land, you know? Yeah, beautiful. And do you remember when the relationship with the land started to shift from being a home and a place you were tending to so much more? Like first the first basically presentation of spirit.
Yes, about 2013, we were talking about the kids had moved out of the house by then. And we were talking about possibly moving to Arizona or California. And at that time, we were doing a pretty serious search about all of the different places that we might move to, just for climate, because in the wintertime, Seattle is not the most hospitable place. It's very dark, dank, cold, depressing. In the springtime and the summertime, it's very nice, but we have such short summers. We really only get 2 months, month and a half of summer, so we don't really get much of a summer. So we were seriously considering moving to someplace else and selling the house. And then right after that, Kathy started getting all of these dreams, and they were all centering around, no, you can't leave. We have things for you to do. You have a mission. And it's like, what mission? What are you talking about? And so she'd get all these lucid dreams, and they became stronger and stronger and stronger until she finally had apparitions show up to her and say, no, we need you. This is what we want you to do. And she would tell me these things, and she says, I think I am going crazy. Do you believe me? And I said, well, of course I believe you. We've been married 20 years, and why wouldn't I believe you? So that's how it started.
Wow. I think about how she must have felt, how many people have been in her shoes around, am I crazy? Like, am I going, is this, and then to be so lucky to have a partner like you that says, I believe you, may not understand everything that's going on right now, but I believe you. Wow. And then when did you start getting a sense that there was like you started being pulled into it, feeling it, hearing it?
Well, that's a good question. At the time that she started telling me things, I felt like this has to be for something. There has to be reason why she's seeing this, why she's being contacted like this, why she's being told that she has work to do. They never mentioned me, but I always felt like, well, we're marriage partners and I'm on the land too, so I was assuming that I would have some place in this also. So that's when it kind of started, but I didn't really actually get jump started into all this until I really got into shamanism, which was one of the things that we kind of were led to also. That they said, study the way of the shaman. And I remember being at work and I get this call from Kathy and she says, you're not going to believe this. She says, the way of the shaman, remember they said, I told you they were talking about the way of the shaman? And I said, yeah. And she said, it's a book. And I said, it's a book? And she said, yeah, by this anthropologist named Michael Harner. And it's all about shamanism. And I said, wow. She goes, I found that and I'm going to go down and get one. And I said, great. I said, get two. I want to read it too. So she got two. And yeah, that's how our journey started. And after that time, then I found about shamanic journeys. I got into that. I took to it instantly. Kathy had a heck of a time doing it. It took her a couple of years before she could really do it, but she got her communication through lucid dreams. And so and her visions that she had. So she had communication. It was just in a totally different. And I remember asking Joseph about that because we would go out to our fire and we would ask him questions. Of course, I couldn't hear anything. I would just have to hear what Kathy communicated to me that he said. And he said, yes, you guys are both gifted, but in different ways, and you have a totally different vibration. So Michael communicates one way, and Kathy communicates another way. And so I thought that was interesting.
That's fascinating. And just for our listeners, Joseph is one of the first Native American spirits that made themselves known on your land. Yeah,
Exactly. He was the shaman of the spirit tribe back there.
yeah, yeah.
And
Fascinating.
he was basically our teacher for a very long time.
And I love what you said, like everyone has a different skill set, in real life, like can I play the piano or can I be a contractor? And then it's the same in the spirit world, right? So Kathy was able to get messages through visions and dreams. You found it very easy to do shamanic journeys. And then how do you feel like those skill sets maybe dovetailed? Do you feel like they dovetailed, or how did that work or develop over time as you guys did your psychopomp work?
Yeah, they definitely dovetailed because like I just said, she had a totally different communication skill than I did. She was on a different vibration than I was. And then we were able to combine forces, and so we were able to accelerate quickly into the whole um, scenario, I guess, of what the tribe was wanted us to do. And so it was great help to have us both come from different communication styles.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned Michael Horner being a teacher of yours, and I think in the book you mentioned Sandra Ingerman as well. Were these some of your any other main teachers that you?
There's many. Hank Wesselman, who was a contemporary of Michael Harner and Sandra Ingerman, they all knew each other, and I think a lot of them started off in Michael Harner's institute, his shamanic institute. Many of the people that we read did, but yeah, there was many. Those are the ones I can think of right off the top of my head.
And it's so interesting because I came from a very conservative background. So when the first time I ever heard of shamans, it was usually in some, say, not expansive context, like just, like, oh, that's just, something not real or whatever. And the more I started getting curious about it, the more fascinated I was about how the most genuine and authentic practitioners are, I mean, like you, like look normal, like not like weird, just like normal, and you're just open to being able to communicate with the unseen realm in in an invitational way, in a receptive way. I think so many of us just close it off because we're told we're supposed to, or we don't want to look crazy, or um, yeah.
Yeah, and when we started getting into um, all of the things that the tribe asked us to do, we didn't tell anyone because we just thought, why? Why would we do that? Nobody, everybody's going to think we're just batshit crazy, and this is just not going to turn out well.
That's
And so,
one of your somewhere in your book. I think at the end you're like, well, there it is. Like our secret is out now, and I just love that because I felt like one day I'm gonna have to like my secret's gonna be out too.
yeah, and then when we came out with our book finally, my own family, I come from a large Irish Catholic family, they just thought we had completely gone crazy. Both of us. Yeah. I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and my mom and dad and all my brothers and sisters, they just thought I was absolutely crazy. My aunt, they're all very, very Catholic.
I,
Yeah.
I can I can see that. I can see. I mean, even now with my family, I don't. I they don't. I haven't come out to them about psychopomp stuff, but I will just talk about death more openly, just mortality itself, and even at that level, they think I'm just totally crazy. Like, why are you talking about death? Um, Fascinating. Okay, and one of the things I loved is how you started being able to connect with your ancestors, and you
Huge. That was
yeah.
huge.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. I try to remember how I made contact with my grandfather. I think it was on a journey, and he ended up being one of my spirit guides, and he had been watching over me since his death in, oh my goodness, 74. Yeah, I had just graduated from high school, and yeah, he died when I was in Arizona going to electronics school down there in Phoenix, Arizona, and when I came back for Christmas. he had died, I think in September, and they didn't tell me. And so I got home and I said, we had gone over to see grandma, and I said, well, where's grandpa? And my mom said, well, I have some bad news about grandpa. And I was like, bad news? How bad? And they said, well, he passed away. And he said, he passed away? Well, when did he pass away? And he said, September. I said, September? My God, you tell me 3 months later? Why didn't you tell me? Oh, we didn't want to interrupt your studies and have you upset and everything. I was like, oh, okay. So I never really got to say goodbye to him. That always was very difficult for me because I was very close to my grandfather, far more closer to my grandfather than my in fact, I kind of used him as a role model because I didn't get along well with my father at all. I was sensitive and he was a Marine Corps sergeant, and it was like oil and water.
Isn't that interesting? These biological families that we come into and how it's going to be so different, so different. Well, how beautiful that you had your grandfather, even though I could see how not finding out until 3 months later. But then in the book, you tell about how you were able to reconnect with him on the other side.
Uh, yeah, I definitely was. He was quite a good teacher for me. There was a trust level. I'm sure Spirit said, "Okay, let's give him somebody that he knows and trusts and will listen to." And so, yeah, my grandpa told me a lot of things, mostly having to do with, I had questions about my sister that had passed away. See, is my grandmother still alive? I think my grandmother had just passed away, so I had questions about them and just a lot of things in general. He said, "Yeah, you're going to have a lot of other teachers too, but I'm the first one that has shown up so far." And so it was a beautiful reunion.
I bet. And for our listeners who really this whole concept of communicating with our loved ones once they have physically passed, what would you say is the biggest realization that you've had? Like when spirits are on the other side and they're communicating with us, were there any like ahas or things that you'd want people to know?
Yeah, oh yeah. Geez, where do I start? I would say probably the biggest realization is that these people are still people. They're not some airy fairy angel creature that is too ethereal to talk to. They're very down to earth. That they don't cuss and swear at you, but I mean they're very very real. I mean they're like you remember them. They are like you remember them, and that closeness. It's just like talking to somebody, and they're still there. They still think about the same things. They still sound the same. I even asked my grandpa, where's your hat? Because he always had this Hamburg on, his Hamburg hat. And it's like, Grandpa, where's your hat? He goes, oh, I can go get the hat. It's like, okay, Grandpa, that's okay. I don't need the hat. But
So we
yeah,
retain an essence of our personalities, even without the physical form, and you're able to sense that as you're communicating. Yeah.
yeah. I'm a very sensitive person just by nature. That's why I had to get out of psychology work because I was too sensitive, and I would take everybody's stuff inside me, and they would feel great and I would feel terrible. And I finally dropped out of my master's program in counseling because of that. And I said, I got to do something else. And so I finally went back to construction, which was
Oh,
my family's business. In my personality, I was being the oldest of 8 kids. I was always the caregiver. My brothers and sisters were very, very close to me. They still are. And because my father worked so much, I took over kind of a father role. So, yeah, so that's how they kind of see me.
when you talk about having teachers, and these are spirit teachers, you had your grandfather, and then can you talk a little bit about other helpers that you've had along the way? I know for you, you're a spirit animal that was quite prominent was the wolf. What can you tell us about your other guides and helpers as you've been doing the work around crossing over souls? Can you tell us a little about what it's like to work with your wolf or other guides?
Yeah, yeah. The more that we became knowledgeable and I guess went in full force to doing psychopomp work, the more helpers showed up, and sometimes at the time that we needed them most. In fact, some of them we don't know who they were. We had never seen them. We never saw them again, but they came just to help us on a particular case of someone who needed us to be crossed over into the light. Sometimes it was their animals, sometimes it was usually some type of a relative. And it was usually somebody who had already crossed over and had come back to try and garner us to help their relative that they wanted to have in the light with them,
Mhm.
because that is their biggest wish, is to have these people that are lost souls come into the light and be with them. And that's how we usually got people to go into the light. And because a lot of times they were feeling sorry for themselves even though they were dead, and they said, nobody wants me, nobody loves me, nobody wants me to go into the light, nobody's even there for me. And it's like, no, 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 you have no idea. I mean, it could be a neighbor, it could be somebody that they only met once. It was just a plethora of all of these different people that were in the light waiting for them and wanting them, and were there, right there on the other side of the light, beckoning them to come in. And they were always surprised. And every single time, I mean, there's only like maybe two or three times I can even recall where people didn't go into the light after seeing that. It's just overwhelming. And the emotion, oh my God, you just crying your eyes out being there and watching this all unfold before you. It's like nothing I've ever seen.
That's beautiful. I'm getting goosebumps just hearing about that. The idea that even if someone becomes a lost soul because of their sense of worth or guilt or remorse or anything, the fact that there's still so much unconditional love and support wanting to bring the soul over.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'm always
Yeah.
thinking about I'm always thinking about the ordinary world versus the spirit world, and how in the
Mhm.
ordinary world, don't we see that also? People who don't see their own worth, people who
Yeah.
are stuck in this sort of black hole of either pity or victimhood or sadness or guilt. And the fact that there are so many people on the outside wanting to help and help them see their true selves. And the fact that that also happens in the spirit realm as well just
Mhm.
fascinates me.
Yeah, it is very fascinating.
Yeah. The mirroring. Do you have a favorite, like a favorite psychopomp story that you'd like to share of a particular crossing that you just remember, that you hold dear?
Well, probably the first time that I actually was able to help, when we were in our backyard. We were going to do a barbecue, which we barbecued all the time. And Kathy was bringing stuff out for me to throw in the barbecue, and she said, "Oh, I got the tap. I think somebody needs some help." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I got the barbecue. Just go help them." And I saw her over on the other side of the yard by where our big fire pit. I made a big 18-foot by 18-foot octagon, and there was a fire in the middle of it. And I could watch her. I could tell she was having a real problem over there. I thought, what the heck is going on over there? Because that usually doesn't happen. And so her voice was raised, and she was, hand motions. And I thought, wow, she's really having a tough time. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I can help her, because this was after she had been doing this probably 9 months to a year, and I was always there as support, but I never really heard or saw, or I could feel, but I wasn't really a part of it. And so I concentrated really hard on opening the light, and then all of a sudden, Kathy had this surprised look on her face. She looked over to me, and she walked over and she says, "You're not going to believe this one." And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I was trying to cross this lady over, and this spirit brought her to me, or it was a living of some sort, and or not a living relative, but a spirit who had passed over, so she was in good shape, and she was trying to get this lady to go into the light, and this lady she said that I murdered my husband because he was a cheating, no good bastard, and blah blah blah, I don't feel bad. And I don't want to go into the light because that's where all the good people go. And I'm not a good people. I'm a rotten person. And she went on and on and on. And she was very agitated. And then all of a sudden, when I concentrated on the light, she just turned, walked in, boom, gone. And that's when Kathy looked at me and said, "What in the heck just happened?" And so that's when we found out that I could help her. And so we used that method for the rest of the time, where we both would expand the light. And I think it's like Joseph said, because we were in different frequencies, we brought a broader spectrum of light than either one of us could separately. So it was
Mm.
very fascinating, very eye-opening to see that happen.
How beautiful. So, can you walk us through a little bit of the process around? So, you mentioned Kathy got the tap, which is sort of
Right,
a feeling or a signal that somebody was around and needed help, a spirit needed help. And then as you evolved to work together, you would work
right.
together to open a
Mhm.
portal, open to the light.
Yeah. Eventually, I got the same tap. You get butterflies in your stomach. That's basically what
Wow.
it was.
Okay. Okay. And then do you feel like you have to enter into any different realm? Like we know when with a shamanic journey, you're putting on the drumming, you're setting an intention, you're entering a different space. When you're doing your psychopomp work, are you able to do it, while drinking tea and eating a cheeseburger, or do you feel like you have to sort of shift into a different state of consciousness?
You have to shift into a different, at least our experience was, we had to shift into a different state of consciousness, but eventually found that our third eye chakra was pretty much open all the time. So we would be eating a cheeseburger and all of a sudden, bonk, bonk, bonk. Oh, someone needs help. Uh, it was the strangest thing. We used to go to this bistro in Seattle all the time, and we crossed over a lot of people there while we were eating, having a beer. So it was really strange. But I think my son, who was really sensitive, Ryan, said he proclaimed one time. He goes, "You guys have your third eye open all the time," and he did too. And we were like, "Huh, okay. Well, I guess that explains why we have all the experiences that we do."
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say again, this for the listeners, like how heartwarming it is, because I think when I think back to my Catholic school days, there was so much fear instilled, right? If you didn't do this, you would go to hell
Yeah.
or you'd be judged, right? And I think a lot of people still subconsciously carry that fear,
Hmm.
whether or not there's religious. It's just like old programming. So for you to be able to say, even if there's like the worst case scenario and you got stuck as a lost soul, there's help. It's not like you're there forever. You can get help. There are
Yeah.
other people that want to come help you. I like that sense of hope, curiosity, positivity.
Hmm.
It's not all doom and gloom. It's like there's people like you who will just find out what that bistro is, and it seems to be a good spot. Yeah. So talking about you mentioned one time where the shamans of your land or the spirits of the land, one of them, maybe the chief at the time, wasn't
Hmm.
so sure about you, right? The white
Right.
people on this
Yeah.
land. And you mentioned something about asking him to look into your heart, right?
Right.
Seeing a pure heart. Can you
Hmm.
describe that experience? Because it's like you had to get the trust of the chief and all the spirits on the land to really commune, to live
Hmm.
there, but also
Yeah.
to get their teachings and also to help. So, can you tell a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, that was something that I don't remember if it was Kathy or I that came up with it. Maybe we both did. But we were talking about how unfortunate it was that because of the history of the white man, and we're as white as they come, that there was not a very good trust level sometimes. And so we decided to open our hearts to them and have them give them permission. Apparently, they cannot do that. They can't invade your psyche or whatever and check out your intentions without your approval. You have to authorize them to do that, give them permission. So one time when one of these times arose when we were trying to convince them that we're good people. We're not here to do anything that's going to hurt you. I just said, give it to me. Take your best shot. Go inside me. Check it out. Both of us. And they did. And they were like, huh, okay, yeah, you're clean. And this was a method that we used several times in different places. And it's like, if there's any doubt about us, go ahead. You have my permission, scan. I am not saying anything that is untrue. I don't have any problem that you're going to find something that you're not going to like. So you go ahead. And they would usually take advantage of this and say, oh, okay, we will. Are you sure? And say, yeah, we're sure. And it turned out good every time. So apparently we were pure of heart.
Yeah. Well, I love what you also said that, just because you're working with the spirit realm doesn't mean that they can invade your space. There's still a
Mhm.
boundary there, and they had to be given permission
Yeah.
to check you out. And I think that's really helpful for people who are worried about such things, to be able to know that that permission needs to be granted in some way. Now, that being said, whenever doing energy work, spiritual work, there is this question of boundaries. How do you be of maximal benefit while still protecting yourself energetically, right? Because we're dealing in realms that
Mhm.
are unseen. So, what would you say are some of the challenges of the work? I mean, you do such beautiful work. You get the tap. There's a lost soul. Their loved ones want you to help them cross them over to
Mhm.
the other side. Most of the time, they do so. What would you say are some of the challenges of that work, especially because your third eye was open all the time? And yeah.
Yeah. I would say the biggest challenge was as far as doing the straight up the psychopomp work, just helping people cross into light. That was fairly innocuous. There was not a lot of danger or things to be concerned about. We never really read a lot or studied a lot. We eventually did about how this all works. We got all of our information from the spirit world. They were the ones that taught us how to do this. They were the ones that asked us to do this. They were the ones that asked us to write the book. So consequently, we didn't really have a lot of fear and we didn't really have very many misgivings as far as doing this work. We felt like we were doing something worthwhile. The spirit in our backyard, of all places, asked us to do this work. And we thought it sounded like a good idea. So we did do this work. Where it started getting a little bit hinky and something to be concerned about was something that they didn't tell us and didn't teach us about, and that was crossing over dark spirits. I don't think they really wanted us to even broach that, but through our own hubris, we decided that that would be a good idea and started crossing over dark spirits that were holding on to the other spirits to, I guess, feed off of them. We called them spiritual vampires or soul suckers. Sometimes they would make us sick. Sometimes I would come into a place and it felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest and I would have to get out right away. There was definitely times when we were far over our head and we shouldn't have been there. And a lot of times Joseph or the chief would say, you shouldn't have done that. You should not have done that. You should not have been there. You should not have made contact with these spirits. They can harm you. We eventually kind of backed away from some of that. And some of our shamanic friends, which we had at that time, because we used to go to drum circle and do some shamanic activities, would say, whoa, you guys are really out there. You're doing stuff that I would never do. And these were people that were shamans for many years. And they said, yeah, you guys just be careful, just be careful. And so we had warnings from not only the chief and Joseph, but from also our shamanic friends. And, it could definitely have been something that made Kathy sick. I don't know if it killed her or not, and I don't know if I ever will. But yeah, it's definitely something to be concerned about. I think if you're doing straight psychopomp work, you don't really have to worry because I think that in some ways you're protected by spirit. But when you get into that realm where it's a gray area, uh, I don't think there's as much protection there.
Mhm.
You have to have, and that's where I got into, actually after Kathy passed away, I got into other ways to do that type of work. And one of them was There's a gentleman called Daniel Fore, Fore, and he did something called ancestral healing. And he had a really interesting concept where he has you make contact with your well spirits, he calls them, and they do the heavy lifting. They do the removal of whatever kind of dark, hinky energy there is around someone,
Mhm,
whether
mhm.
they're living or dead. And so I practiced that for a while, and it was very effective. And I made contact with ancestors that I didn't even know I had, that were Celtic, that were shamans. One of them, it was really interesting. It was a lady. She was the strongest one of all, actually. And she was someone who was not only my mother in one life, but was my wife in two other lives, which really blew me away. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. But you find out this kind of stuff when you do these shamanic travels and get into that realm. And she was very helpful.
Well, it makes sense that she would come forward then because you guys have lived many lifetimes together.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So what I'm hearing is there is the psychopomp work of just crossing over individual lost souls,
Right.
light and love, bring them into the light, and that's pretty good. You're supportive, you have your team, and you can call on your ancestors and their ancestors.
Hmm.
But then you and Kathy started like doing more difficult heavy lifting around the
Right.
dark energies, and that's when it sounds like you were hearing some, in retrospect, would you say warning or just caution from Chief and from your other shaman friends around, wow, this is really going around. This is really going in a realm that's
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I remember Joseph, the first time we had crossed over a dark entity into the light, he's like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And that was quite a shock to us because we thought he'd do everything, but
yeah,
he didn't know that.
right. And
And
I
and
and I,
I
and
think
I know that you told a story in your book around really calling in the warriors. I think this is one of the soul
mhm,
suckers in the lake, and
yeah,
you know, calling warriors and calling in a lot of team to help with that soul sucking energy, and pretty major. I like to think about the spirit realm and then like the ordinary world realm, and I guess it's kind of like someone, let's say, this was an analogy I was thinking about, let's see if it resonates. I might want to go, let's say, to the downtown streets of San Francisco and help the homeless. I might want to
mhm,
bring them food. I might want to bring them, you know, shelter or a coat. But just because I want to help them, I would have to have a different level of awareness if I was going to walk into the Tenderloin at midnight, you know? So
oh,
it's like, yeah,
absolutely.
it's a different awareness to
Mhm,
have, and to have discernment around what is it that we're equipped to do. And it sounds like you guys were really on the growth edge, let's say, of testing out what was possible, and the bravery, and but also the discernment needed for that. Are you still
yeah,
doing any of this work right now, Michael?
no,
Mhm, mhm.
no, I've pretty much backed away from any type of. I still do psychopomp work occasionally, but right now I'm in a because we didn't have any boundaries when Kathy and I were doing this work. It was just wide open. It was like the wild, wild west, and everything that we were asked to do, we did. We used no discernment whatsoever, which was very foolish, I think, in retrospect. Now, I think that if I had to do it all again, I would just stick with the psychopomp work. I wouldn't get into all this other stuff.
Plenty of pump work to be done at a safe level for you
Yes,
as well as the
absolutely.
practitioner. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I've been able to teach four different people how to do this type of work now. It's very teachable.
Mhm,
Very teachable.
mhm. And it's work that has to come from the heart because it's not like you get paid for it,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it has to come from the
Yeah.
heart. It has to be pure intention. Yeah.
Yeah. The people on the other side don't pay well at all.
So, would you, for anyone wanting to get into psychopomp work, is there any ritual that you do? You know, like you said, at the level of traditional normal psychopomp work, it's you're pretty protected. You got help, you got spirit, you got guides, you got
Mhm.
ancestors. But nevertheless, do you have any advice around energetic protection? Anything that you started doing personally? Any saging or candles or setting your, you know, or you feel like it's nope, nope, the light itself is protective.
Well, that's a good question. And I guess it just depends on what your comfort level is. If crystals, sage, incantations, special clothes you wear, whatever makes you feel more connected is your way. It's the way for you. That's what you should do. It's like a lady or even a man who wants some type of plastic surgery because of their ears or stick out too far, or whatever makes my philosophy is whatever makes you feel more empowered and better about your own self-esteem. I think you should do it, no matter what somebody says. It's not their business, it's your business. It's how you feel about yourself. And so in the same vein, whatever helps you to accelerate your knowledge or your connectedness to whatever you're trying to help is good, I think.
And that's really, isn't that true? Like it's really, we are each as individuals on our own journey of self-discovery. In that
Right.
self-discovery, we may also help others, but to know thyself and what we need in that journey. I mean, I loved how you and Kathy, like you said, you could be at a bistro having a beer and just, I love that you didn't have a lot of, fluff around it and you were still able to get the work done. I think these
Mhm.
days I shouldn't say it happens all the time, but there's this idea of ritual. And I think ritual is very important. I think they're important training grounds.
Mhm.
But the idea is that the ritual, I think, can also just come from within of just being present and open. And it doesn't have to be like sometimes you're at a bistro, you don't have all your crystals and rattles and
Yeah.
candles and that you can still do the work in a very safe and protected and heartfelt way.
Yeah, I think it's most effective when you have all of those things in your heart and in your soul, and because you don't know when these spirits are going to make contact with you. You have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it's at very inconvenient times.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes you're in the shower, sometimes you're, on vacation, sometimes. And every time we went on vacation, I don't know if it's because you're more relaxed, we would get more activity than when we're at home.
Yeah. Now, how did you hold boundaries around that? Were you ever able to say, go to my waiting room. We'll deal with y'all later. I'm going to just enjoy for the day. Or did you feel like, oh, it's really quick to cross over. Let's just take care of it now. Like how did you and Kathy find a sort of a boundary for yourself?
Well, that was probably one of the things that we should have done. We didn't have any boundaries. We just, every time that there was a tap, we would deal with it. Today, I probably would say something like that, like, okay, deal with me later or come back later when I'm ready.
Yeah.
You're ready. And what one interesting thing that we found was that on the other side, there is no time. There is no time. They have no idea, no concept, no feeling of time. It's all just I don't know what you call it. It's just all one big continuous loop.
So in a way so like we might say, "Oh, I feel bad because I'm making them wait," but that's our human projection in this reality. In their
Yeah,
reality, there is no time. So it's
yeah,
okay for us to
exactly.
hold our boundaries and say, "Hang out in the waiting room. I'll go come back later when I'm ready." And it's not. We don't need to project that we're making them suffer longer because there's no time over there.
Because some of the people that we crossed over were present day. Some of them were old. Some of them were very old. Some of them were ancient. So it was from all different time periods. And it was all the same to them. They didn't really I think I asked somebody about that one time because sometimes we get to talk to these people a little bit before we cross them over, and I have questions. I have a lot of questions, and sometimes I would just ask these people these questions, and they would tell me. So it was very fascinating. I'm a very curious person, so it was very fascinating while talking to these spirits and getting this information directly from the spirit world.
What do you think was most surprising in these conversations? Any trend or theme that was meant as a message for you?
Yeah, probably the most interesting thing was just the unworthiness of these people, that they didn't feel like they were worthy to cross into the light. And I'm not really sure what finally changed their mind, although we were pretty persuasive. We would open the light for them or a representation of the light and say, hey, all these people are on the other side. They want you. And here they are. And they would always be very surprised and very touched. And of course, the emotion was just off the chart. And then they would go in. But every time, it seemed like for one reason or another, they thought that they had to or they should stay on Earth and not cross into the light. But after we were able to talk to them and counsel them pretty much, then they decided, okay, maybe I can go into the light. But I still don't know what originally brought them to us. All I know is that I asked a spirit one time, how do you find us? What is it? I mean, do we have a glow? Is it the feeling? Do we have a stink? I don't know what it is. And they would tell me, well, it's hard to explain. It's all of those. It's everything. We just feel like we're following some type of energy to you, and that you will help us. And that's what they told us. And I was like, huh, okay, that's interesting.
That's so interesting. And the fact that they this I mean, first of all, the fact that you mentioned the sense of low self-worth, or like they're not worthy of going into the light. I think that's a theme that's not really recognized enough. And I often wonder, like, well, and just to, for our listeners to reiterate, the amount of people that are stuck in sort of the lost realm is very small. Like the vast majority of people are able to cross over at death just fine, and they find their way to the light and they're fine. So the people that are still stuck, the sense of non-worthiness, I often wonder what we can do in while they're still alive so that they don't get stuck in the middle, stuck in this other realm. And do you have any thoughts on that? If we were to be doing preventive work, my day job is a physician, I do a lot of preventive medicine, mind, body, and
Uh,
spirit. What do you think that would look like if we were to embark on a mission to just reduce the number of lost souls to begin with? Any thoughts on that coming from everything you've seen and been through?
yeah, yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts about that. And I think they revolve around education that, I don't think you need to get so caught up into whatever it is that your religion tells you, that just take it by face value, that, if you're bad, you go to hell, which there isn't any hell. And if you're good, you go to heaven. And you just sit on a cloud and nothing happens. As far as I can see, there is a tremendous amount of can change and uh, just it's a very tumultuous lifestyle. It looks like after you die, there's a lot of things that you do. It's like Dolores Cannon's book, The Convoluted Universe. Boy, she isn't kidding. It is a convoluted universe. There is so much out there, and I've only seen a fraction of it, and it just blows me away. So now I lost your original question. What'd you ask me?
Yeah, this notion. Well, you're right. It is so like, I have a teacher that says you can't initiate the uninitiated, because if we try to initiate people to just how deep and complex the universe is, it might be too much to handle. It's a lot,
Yeah,
right? Even just the
yeah,
idea that, oh, this isn't the end, and then in spirit realm, there's other stuff going on, and then oh, there's it's actually a whole very complex thing that this existence is not the main thing.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a lot to handle. And then I like to reorient to, well, we are here right now in physical form. So what is it that we're meant to do? What is it that we can work on as we're in physical form? And so the question I was asking is, if we were to take on a preventive stance, let's say we're like
yeah.
preventive doctors for the spirit, so we don't become a less lost soul. Any thoughts around how we might start to support this sense of awakening to worthiness, no matter what we do, so
Yeah,
that we understand that
yeah,
now, you know.
yeah. I think that people need to know that crossing into the light is everybody's privilege. Everyone gets to cross into the light. And then the light will figure out, the universe, the light, God, whatever you want to call it, is going to figure out, no matter what kind of a life you've had, even if you have not had a good life, what to do with you after that, what you need, what type of rehabilitation you need. So that's job one, is just to educate people that when you die, don't mess around in this realm that we're in right now. You go into the light because that's where you belong. And one thing that was really interesting that I remember that Joseph told us one time is that, you know, there are so many people now. I said earlier that it's a relatively small amount of people that don't go into light, but it's enough that it's really mucking up the flow, I guess, of people going into the light. There are way too many spirits that are stuck on earth here in our realm that should not be here. And so us opening up the light and expanding the light through the work that we were doing was a very needed, important thing, they kept telling us. And so it made us feel very good that we were doing something that not very many people were doing, and that it was something that was very necessary for the, I don't know what you call it, the flow of spirits going through the whole karmic system. So yeah, it's definitely something that people are not aware of. It's not something that religion teaches, and it's something that mainstream humanity doesn't really seem to know about.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like if we all knew that we were worthy, despite anything that we've done wrong, or and you mentioned, if everyone just knew to go in the light, do you believe it would be helpful as someone is actively dying, someone's actively transitioning? Do you believe it's helpful for the people around them to say anything to them, like follow the light, go into the light, or do you feel like that makes a difference at all, or is it each spirit is going to do what they're going to do?
Well, yeah, yeah, I do. I think that if people had other family members or loved ones around them that were encouraging them when you finally, the clock's over and you finally go into that death zone, look for that light, because that's where all of your happiness and everything good about your life will be evaluated, and you'll move on to the next realm. And one thing that I should mention is I made Kathy, I made contact with Kathy after she passed away, and I said, "What are you doing now?" And she says, "Well, I am helping newly formed, or not newly formed, how did she explain it to me? She was helping people that were going to be reincarnated, and she was helping them to discern what type of life that they wanted to choose and come back into." And so she was a counselor, angel, something like that, that helps people to, she was educating people as far as what they could expect for what type of life that they were choosing to come back into as a reincarnated being. Thought that was very interesting. And she was a teacher, and so that was right up her alley. And so her skill set was being used. So I thought that was wonderful.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And what a gift. What a gift that you were able to connect with Kathy, your
Yeah,
partner in, the bridge. And
yeah,
after she passed, to know that she's number one, okay, and not just okay, but she is,
thriving.
a guide of sorts up there, like helping
Yeah, and
people
she
to
loved
understand.
her job, she said.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And I think for a lot of our listeners who may or may not have thought about reincarnation, but just being curious to the concept of this may not be the last life, and before popping into a new one, there's people like Kathy helping to make
Yeah.
sure it's the right and good experience for the next
Oh,
time.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
So at the end of your book, you wrote down four main messages that you wanted everyone to know and
Hmm.
hear. And let me see if I have that here. I wrote them down. So the idea of everything has a spirit, whether it's a rock or a tree or, you know, a bird. What would you like people to know about that fact? The fact that every single thing has a spirit, not just humans.
Well, that's called animism. And animism is something that some of the Eastern religions have known about for centuries, millennium. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful way to look at the world, like the Native Americans did, where everything, they had reverence for everything in the earth, no matter what it was. They would always have that reverence. When they would kill a deer, they would thank it for its life, and, do almost like a little prayer ceremony, and hold it as it died. And just that whole concept of, we are not like, one of the beefs I had with the Catholic Church is that somewhere in the Catholic Bible, there's all kinds of Bibles, they say something about man is the steward of the earth. He can do with it as he pleases. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You have to have, because that respect and reverence that you have for all things carries into everything that you think about, everything you do, everything that's predicated in your life, everything in the universe, it should be respected. And if everybody had that concept in their head, the universe and the world, this world especially, would be a much better place.
Isn't that the truth? When we're not just taking, 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 and we just pause for a minute with that reverence, with that gratitude, with that acknowledgement,
Mhm.
how the world could shift, how the world could shift. I love the guidance from the Native Americans around leaving an
Oh yeah.
offering when we take, and, whether it's verbal or tobacco. Yeah, I think we've lost that. As advanced as humans have gotten, we've really gone backwards in a lot of ways in terms of our connection with all of nature and its allies. The second thing you wrote is that the spirit world reconnects us to source. So this idea of all of us are able to be connected to source, and we also have help in doing so.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the spirit world and nature are basically the same entity. It's just different faces of the same entity. So anytime that we spend time in nature, we are closer to the spirit world and God, and if you want to call the spirit world and God, in that vein. So yeah, you definitely have a in there every time that you go into nature to be closer to God. And it's something that we as human beings seem to crave. I always crave water and I crave being in nature. And those two things are very godly to me.
I have so many patients that say that nature is their church. And, it's like
Mhm.
I want to give them a high five. Yes, go bathe in nature as much as you can, whether it's you actually are or you're just thinking about it, but be in nature. The third thing you wrote down is that, and you said this already, everyone gets to go to light. Everyone has access to going into light. There are no exceptions, no matter how bad you think you were, no matter what awful things you did, no matter what skeletons are in the closet, that everyone is worthy of going into the light. And what a beautiful message, especially for people who have guilt or worry about that.
Yeah, and as human beings, we just naturally are very judgy. That I remember when we first started crossing people in the light, and some of them were not particularly good people, like the lady I was talking about earlier that killed her husband, and she was very unapologetic about it. And it's like, and Kathy, I remember she looked over to Joseph and said, "Really? Does this gal deserve to go in the light?" It's like, yes, and this is why. Because you don't get to judge. You don't get to play God, and that's up to the light, and it's up to the universe to figure out how to rehabilitate this person. And one time Joseph showed me an image. This is when I could see better, shamanic seeing. And he showed me of what happens when someone goes into the light. They have all of these black scales, all of them, all over them that cover their soul, and no light gets in. And as they come into the light, all of these scales just kind of melt away and fall off. And it exposes the pure person. Everybody, no matter how bad they were in life, has has a pure soul. It's just, I think it's just how souls are. That's their natural state. And so being able to, how would I say it, to get to that point, it kind of clears the slate. And then You can take that person when they go into the light and say, okay, let's evaluate your life. What'd you do right? What'd you do wrong? What would you do next time better? And you get another chance for reincarnation to make it right. Because after all, life is just, the human life is just a school. It's a school that we learn every time that we have an incarnation. We learn something and hopefully we progress. Sometimes we don't. And we have to go back and do it again and learn that lesson again. So yeah,
I love
it's
that. And it's not
very interesting.
punitive, right? It's like, okay, well,
No,
let's
not at
try again.
all.
It's held in love, but do it again. I love that image of, no matter what we did bad, we go into the light, and then the light has a way to cleanse, rehabilitate, get the black scales off, whatever you want to call it, so that the true soul is visible again. And then
Mhm.
people like Kathy saying, okay, what do we want to do next with this journey? I love
Yeah,
that. And then the last thing you wrote down and from your 4 lessons was that really there are helpers. There are helpers to offer that way home, and we've been talking about that throughout today, where we're not alone in this journey, whether it's our ancestors or spirit guides or light itself. And how beautiful if everyone can just hold that in their hearts, right? That we are supported in now and in the transition.
it's definitely important for people to know that there's so much help out there, and if we were only aware of that and we're able to open our third eye or our hearts or just be aware and know that there are all of these angels, spirits, guides, animals, some of that we can't even imagine are around us constantly. I mean, we're just enough out of sync with them that we can't see them, but that doesn't mean that they aren't there. And when your third eye is open, you sometimes you see them. I did, and I was quite touched. And they have no other agenda than to help you to be a better you.
And that was going to be one of my closing questions here as we wrap this up, is one piece of wisdom or guidance for regular folk. What a beautiful invitation. Can we lean into the knowing and the trust that we have so much love and support and guidance, and just because we can't always see them doesn't mean they're not there.
Mhm.
And any ideas of ways that if someone says, I don't feel it. I don't see it. There's nothing there. I don't think I have any help. Do you have maybe a tip on baby steps to start opening their third eye or their heart to that receptivity?
Well, I would wholeheartedly recommend anybody, even if they do have religion, because shamanism is not really a religion, but to study some sort of shamanism and get to the point where you can do shamanic travels, because that will open your eyes tremendously. I mean, you'll actually hear and see things that are so close to you and around you, it will put you in sync with this other realm, behind the veil, and it will really advance you as far as your knowledge and your understanding that we are not the center of the universe. We're not even close. There is so much more out there. All these benevolent beings that are here to help us and love us and guide us and teach us and support us. We have an unbelievable amount of support, and it's something that has changed my life forever.
Beautiful. And last night I did look up the one of the definitions of shaman, and the definition I found is someone who is of benefit and in service in bridging and connecting the seen with the unseen realms. And so it really all is in service of the light and to help others. And to know that ability is in each of us, the ability to learn how to do shamanic travel. And it just takes a little bit of curiosity, and there's so much guidance out there.
Yeah, and everybody can do this. Absolutely everybody. Not everybody thinks they can do that. It might be in conflict with what your particular religion is, but if you're curious enough, I would definitely recommend people to follow that calling to at least explore that and be aware of that.
Beautiful. And this podcast really is about curiosity around all things related to mortality. So I think if anyone even is listening to this point, they are ready. They're ready for that next level. Well, Michael, this has been such a privilege and a pleasure to have this conversation. And thank you for sharing your years of wisdom and guidance and the lessons that you've learned from the practice of helping lost souls to cross over. I cannot wait to hear the feedback from our listeners, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So maybe we'll have you back for a part two.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, and I hope that your series does really well.